I used to mark my birthdays in pencil because there was always a chance my family would forget. My sister's dates were etched in gold, embossed on invitations thick enough to cut glass. For 15 years, I became the invisible planner, balloons, bands and champagne fountains for her, while my own day disappeared into leftover pizza boxes. This year, I sent a single email nobody bothered to open. 2 weeks later, a ballroom stood empty while I stood barefoot on a beach, the waves whispering my name. If you think that was the ending, you don't know the ledger I kept. Dinner at my parents' house always had a way of shrinking me. That night, the chandelier over the dining table gleamed like a crown meant only for one head, and it wasn't mine. My mother slid a thick cream envelope toward my father with the flourish of a magician, her nails clicking against the embossed crest on the flap. The calligrapher said this design is the most elegant of the season, she beamed, as though she'd personally been crowned for ordering fancy stationery. My father leaned back, pleased with himself. I pulled some strings with the country club, he added, secured the grand ballroom for Lila's 31st, only the best. I sipped water too quickly, the ice clinking against my teeth. The words floated over me like a language I once knew but had forgotten how to speak. Across the table, my sister Lila tossed her blonde hair over one shoulder, already scrolling through her phone. "Diamond elegance," she announced, as if she'd invented glamour itself. Bigger centerpieces than the Wilsons had. Mum clapped her hands softly, delighted. Dad grunted his approval. They were strategizing like generals before battle. I was just the invisible soldier, expected to carry the weight but never wear the medal. The smell of roasted chicken filled the room, but all I could taste was the familiar bitterness of being overlooked. Every April, 2 weeks after Lila's grand spectacles, my own birthday arrived like a guest no one invited. 16 years old. I wrote in my journal, family at Lila's volleyball game, no candles. 17, I scraped cheese off a cold pizza, alone at the kitchen counter, because Mum said, we're all partied out. 21, I missed my own dinner reservation because the DJ Lila had booked, cancelled, and someone needed to fix it. That someone was me. My handwriting in those journals turned tighter with each year, cramped and angry. It felt like shouting into a void. Evie, darling, you'll handle the details again, Mum said now, her tone light, as though she were offering me an honour. She slid a manila folder across the table. A platinum credit card rested on top, gleaming like a bribe. Deposits by Friday, Dad added, tapping the card. He chuckled. We'll reimburse you, eventually. The joke was stale, the kind that leaves no one laughing. I placed my hand on the folder, fingers trembling, but no one noticed. They never did. I stared at the folder as if it might explode. Inside, I knew, were magazine clippings, Pinterest printouts, vendor numbers scribbled in Mum's script. The same thick file I'd received every year since I was 16, each edition heavier than the last. I lifted it, and the weight pressed into my palms. My chest tightened. This was my inheritance. Labour disguised as love. Later that night, back in my apartment, I opened the folder on my kitchen counter. The glossy pages spilled out like confetti meant for someone else's celebration. Lila wanted chandeliers, imported roses, champagne fountains taller than the guests. I rubbed my temples, exhaustion spreading like ink. My laptop chimed with a bank notification. Curious, I pulled up old records, tracing through past transfers tied to family expenses. That's when I found it. A withdrawal from the university fund that had once been mine, a promise of independence my parents had made when I was a child. The note beside the transaction, payment to Harrison Entertainment, live band deposit. The date lined up perfectly with Lila's engagement party, the one with the jazz quartet flown in from Chicago. I remembered clapping politely as the musicians filled the night with music, never realizing the cost had been my future. My breath caught as I stared at the figure. My tuition had been siphoned off to pay for her spotlight. I printed the statement, slid it into a plastic sleeve, and added it to a folder labelled simply Ledger. My hands shook, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was fury crystallized into proof. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't being dramatic. The evidence was in black and white. My life had been used as collateral for my sister's celebrations. I leaned against the counter, folder open, records spread around me. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence, steady and indifferent. In that moment, the years of pizza box birthdays, the missed candles, the laughter that never included my name, all converged into a single sharp thought. I am done disappearing. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, the fluorescent lights humming above rows of cubicles. My desk was stacked with quarterly reports I'd finished ahead of schedule, a testament to how much of my energy I poured into tasks that weren't mine at home. Mr. Hanley, my manager, paused as he passed by with his coffee. He studied me for a moment, his brow furrowed. "You look tired, Evie. Take care of yourself, okay? We can survive without you for a day." His words landed heavier than he knew. I nodded, forcing a smile, but inside something cracked. Even at work, people could see what my family refused to acknowledge, that I was running on fumes. My phone buzzed with a text. Naomi. "Again? They've got you doing all the heavy lifting?" I stared at the screen, my throat tightening. She knew. She always knew. I typed back, "Same as always." At lunch, I slipped away to the storage room, carrying a cardboard box marked photo albums. Dust coated the covers. I flipped open one at random, pages stiff from age. Birthday after birthday stared back at me, Lila in sequined dresses, blowing out candles on tiered cakes, surrounded by balloons and crowds of friends. My hand trembled as I turned each page, the weight of years pressing down. Then I reached a single photograph, faded at the edges. Me at 5 years old, hair in crooked pigtails, leaning over a small cake with 3 candles. Aunt June's handwriting scrawled on the back, "Happy birthday, Evie. Never forget you matter." It was the only evidence that my childhood had contained even a whisper of celebration. Tears blurred the edges of the photo as I pressed it to my chest. Aunt June had been the one person who remembered me without being asked, who slipped me a cupcake when everyone else was too busy making Lila's day sparkle. I closed the album slowly, my resolve hardening. That night, back in my apartment, I opened the folder I had started the evening before, the one I labelled Ledger. Page after page of receipts, contracts and bank records stared up at me, caterers, florists, DJs. Thousands of dollars I had fronted for Lila's parties under the promise of repayment. Some had been reimbursed months late, others not at all. I highlighted each line item in bright yellow, the colour screaming back at me. The total glared, enough to have taken me on vacations I'd never dared to plan, enough to have bought me freedom. I ran my fingers over the numbers, each digit a scar. It wasn't just about money, it was the message beneath it, that my time, my effort, my savings were expendable for the sake of appearances, that my worth was measured only by how well I served someone else's spotlight. My laptop screen glowed in the dim light of the kitchen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. For 15 years, I had swallowed resentment, told myself it wasn't worth the fight, that family harmony mattered more than my own voice. But the ledger told a different story, a story of theft, of invisibility, of a life eroded in service of someone else's milestones. I opened a blank email. The subject line typed itself, regarding Lila's birthday planning. I wrote with precision, each word a blade. I explained that I was officially withdrawing from the role of party planner. I attached a detailed checklist of vendors, contacts and deadlines, everything laid out so clearly a stranger could follow it. I highlighted the final note. If deposits are not placed by the 12th, the venue will be released. For once, I wasn't begging to be heard. I was stating facts. I reread the email twice, my heart pounding, fear mixing with exhilaration. My mouse hovered over the send button. I thought of my journals filled with forgotten birthdays, of Aunt June's photograph, of the ledger glowing yellow with years of neglect. My throat tightened, then I clicked. The whoosh of the sent message echoed louder than fireworks. I sat back, trembling, but a strange calm washed over me. For the first time in my life, I had drawn a line my family couldn't cross without consequence. It wasn't freedom yet, but it was a beginning. The email sat in my sent folder like a silent rebellion. Its attachments neatly stacked. Vendor list, contract templates, deadlines in bold red. I'd written it the way I wrote office memos, efficient, professional, impossible to misinterpret. If deposits are not placed by April 12th, the venue will be released. There was no ambiguity, no wiggle room. It was my declaration that I was done carrying this burden alone. The little read notifications pinged one by one. Mom seen, Dad seen, even Lila seen. But none of them replied. The silence stretched into hours, then days, until it became its own answer. They had read my refusal, and in their world, that meant nothing. To them, I wasn't a person with boundaries. I was background noise, a default resource. Meanwhile, group chats about Lila's diamond elegance theme lit up my phone. She'd scrapped glitz and glamour for something even shinier, demanding bigger centerpieces, taller fountains, a custom gown. Mum texted a photo of silver fabric swatches to the family thread, captioned, "Isn't this perfect?" My screen stayed blank where my own name should have appeared. At work, between answering emails and formatting spreadsheets, I scrolled through Airbnb listings with Naomi. She leaned over my shoulder, her earrings glinting under the office lights. "Outer Banks," she whispered like a secret. "Look at this one. The deck practically hangs over the water." Ben joined us later at lunch, sliding into the booth with his usual grin. "I've got miles about to expire," he said. "Use them. Upgrade to first class. Consider it my birthday gift to you." I blinked at him, stunned. No one had ever offered me something so indulgent, without strings. "Ben, you don't have to—" He cut me off. "Exactly. I don't have to. I want to." Jules chimed in over her salad. "I'll bring the champagne. You bring yourself. That's all." The words lodged in my chest. Bring yourself. It sounded so simple, but when had I last been allowed to? That evening I sprawled on my couch with my laptop balanced on my knees. Screenshots filled a new folder labelled My Birthday, pastel beach houses with wraparound porches, dolphin tours, seafood restaurants with string lights across their patios. Each click felt like oxygen filling lungs that had been starved for years. My phone buzzed. Aunt June's name lit up the screen. She rarely texted, so I opened it immediately. "Honey, I saw your email." "Good for you, don't back down. Give yourself permission to show up, to exist, to matter." Tears burned the corners of my eyes. I typed back quickly, fingers stumbling. "Trying, Aunt June, it feels scary." Her reply came instantly. Scary usually means important. I set the phone down and leaned my head back against the couch. Outside, city lights blinked against the night, but inside, something steadier flickered awake in me. For so long, I'd been the one gluing everyone else's life together. What if, for once, I let the glue crack? What if I let their ballroom collapse and instead I stood barefoot on sand, candles in the wind, surrounded by people who actually saw me? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, not of dread, but of possibility. I opened my calendar and blocked off the week of my birthday in bold blue, out of office. For the first time, the words didn't feel like a fantasy. They felt like a promise. The calls began the next morning, relentless and shrill. My phone rattled against my desk like it was trying to escape. Mom, Dad, Lila, over and over again. Each time, I let it buzz until the voicemail icon blinked. Then I typed the same reply into our family thread. Check the email I sent. All details are there. They didn't want to check the email. They wanted me to fold, to step back into the role I'd always filled. When I didn't, their messages shifted from polite reminders to sharp commands. Evie, this isn't funny. We need you to handle this like you always do. Do your job. The words seared, not because I believed them, but because they revealed the truth. They saw me as staff, not family. I silenced the phone and shoved it into a drawer. For the first time in years, I allowed the noise to fade. The quiet was terrifying, but it was also liberating. That night, unable to sleep, I searched through old boxes in my closet, the kind that smelled faintly of dust and time. At the bottom, beneath holiday cards and forgotten letters, I found one of my mother's spiral-bound notebooks. The cover was cracked, the pages yellowed. I shouldn't have opened it, but curiosity pulled harder than guilt. Her handwriting swept across the pages, lists of chores, grocery, budgets, reminders. Then, in between practical notes, I saw a single line scrawled almost angrily, as if she had pressed the pen too hard. Sometimes I feel like the invisible child. No one notices me. I froze. Invisible child. The same phrase I'd whispered to myself in high school when friends asked about my birthday plans. The same phrase I'd written in journals I never showed anyone. It wasn't just me. She had lived it too. I sank onto the floor, the notebook open across my lap. Tears blurred the ink until the letters bled together. For so long, I'd painted her as the villain, the one who favoured Lila, who forgot me, who reduced my life to afterthought pizza. But here, in her own words, was the echo of my pain. She hadn't broken the cycle, she had passed it down. The grief was sharp, almost unbearable. Yet beneath it, a strange understanding unfurled. My mother hadn't invented neglect, she had inherited it. She repeated what she knew. That knowledge didn't excuse her, but it explained the hollow space between us. I cried until my throat ached, the kind of sobs that leave your body trembling and empty. When the tears finally subsided, I wiped my face with the back of my sleeve and closed the notebook. My chest felt raw, scraped clean, but also lighter. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't exaggerating. The pain I carried was real, passed like a family heirloom. In the morning, I set my phone on the counter and recorded a new voicemail greeting. My voice was steady, firmer than I expected. You've reached Evelyn Brooks. I'm unavailable until further notice. Please leave a message. Unavailable. The word tasted revolutionary. For decades, I had been perpetually available. On call for every emergency, every whim, every last-minute crisis that wasn't mine. Now, with one simple phrase, I had shut the door. I packed my suitcase with deliberate care. Sundresses I'd never dared to wear. The wide-brimmed hat I'd bought on clearance but never used, a pair of sandals still in their box. Each item felt like an act of defiance, a promise to myself. When I zipped the bag shut, the sound was final, like a seal pressed into wax. My phone vibrated again, flashing Mum's name, but I didn't reach for it. Instead, I rolled the suitcase to the door and placed it there, ready. For the first time in my life, I was choosing me. The salty air of the Outer Banks wrapped around me like a long-lost embrace. The house Naomi had found stood pale blue against the horizon, its porch stretching toward the sea. As I climbed the wooden steps, I saw it, a hand-painted banner fluttering in the ocean breeze. "Happy birthday, Evie." The letters shimmered in bright colours, uneven but beautiful, proof that someone had taken the time to write my name. My chest tightened. For 39 years I had waited to see those words celebrated, not scribbled at the last minute on a grocery store card. Naomi emerged from the doorway holding a cluster of balloons that bobbed in the wind. "Surprise!" she said, grinning wide. Behind her, Ben carried a cooler, and Jules trailed with a cake box balanced carefully in her arms. Their laughter spilled across the porch, light and unforced, unlike the strained applause I was used to at home. I stepped inside, toes sinking into the cool wooden floorboards. The living room smelled faintly of salt and lemon cleaner. Through the wide windows, the ocean stretched endlessly, waves glinting under the sun. I pressed a hand to the glass, grounding myself in the reality of it. This wasn't a fantasy. I was here, and it was mine. Later, I sat on the deck with a notebook on my lap, the pages fluttering in the wind. My pen scratched across the paper. No more disappearing. I wrote the words 3 times, underlining them until the ink bled through. The mantra steadied me, a vow I wanted to carry forward. As I wrote, I imagined what was happening miles away at Westlake Country Club. There, the manager stood in the cavernous ballroom, clipboard in hand. The chandeliers sparkled, but the tables were bare. No linens, no flowers, no champagne fountain. He frowned, flipping through the schedule. Nothing listed for tonight. He checked again. Still nothing. The room was booked for a wedding tomorrow, but tonight, empty. At 6:15, the first guests trickled in, their heels clicking against marble floors, their sequined gowns catching the light. They looked around, confusion etched across their faces. "Is this the Matthews party?" one asked a passing server. The man checked his clipboard, shook his head. "No record of that here." More guests arrived, their voices echoing in the empty space. Some double-checked their invitations, holding the thick envelopes with embossed crests, confirming the date and time. 6:30. Still no decorations, no music, just the sterile hum of fluorescent lights. Back on the porch, the sea breeze lifted my hair as Jules set the cake down in front of me. It wasn't tiered or gilded, just simple chocolate with whipped cream frosting. My throat constricted at the sight. "Make a wish," she whispered. I closed my eyes. For once, I didn't wish to be noticed by them. I wished for strength to notice myself. At 6:45, the parking lot at Westlake filled with luxury cars, headlights sweeping across the pavement. Guests milled about, whispers turning sharp. A woman in a sequined dress tapped her heel impatiently. "They said this would be the event of the year." The manager shook his head again. "No booking, no staff, no catering." His words spread like wildfire, disbelief sparking into irritation. Phones lit up as guests texted one another, questions piling with no answers. Meanwhile, Ben poured champagne into mismatched glasses, handing one to me. To the birthday girl, he said, clinking his glass gently against mine. The bubbles fizzed, cool against my lips, as laughter rose around me. At 7 sharp, the double doors at Westlake opened and Lila swept in. Her gown shimmered gold under harsh lights, her expression shifting from poised confidence to horror as she scanned the barren room. Her heels clicked furiously across the floor as she demanded, "Where are the decorations? The DJ? The flowers?" Her voice cracked against the emptiness. Guests shifted uncomfortably, some already edging toward the doors. I, on the other hand, leaned back in my chair, notebook closed, glass raised. The waves roared louder than any applause I had ever craved. For the first time, the day belonged to me. Chaos unfolded inside the Westlake ballroom like a scene from a play with no script. Lila stood in the centre of the polished floor, her gown of molten gold catching every harsh fluorescent light, turning her horror into spectacle. "Where is everything?" she shrieked, her voice echoing against bare walls. Guests murmured, fanning themselves with invitations that promised glittering elegance but had delivered nothing. Mom rushed forward, clutching a handful of fabric swatches as if they could explain away the emptiness. "There must be some mistake," she stammered, eyes darting to the venue manager. Dad fumbled with his phone, already dialing numbers, sweat beading at his temples. The manager remained calm, almost apologetic. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Brooks. There was no booking confirmed, no deposits placed. We have no staff, no catering scheduled." His words fell like stones into the silence. Lila spun on her heel, her hair whipping across her shoulders. "That's impossible! My sister, she handles everything." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and damning. Guests exchanged glances. A few shifted uncomfortably, edging toward the exit. The illusion of the Matthews family's flawless celebrations had cracked wide open. Back on the Outer Banks, Naomi sat beside me on the deck, her phone buzzing against the wood. She glanced at the screen, my mother's name, and hit decline. She slid the device across the table toward me, but I shook my head. "Not tonight." Naomi nodded, pressing the phone to silent before slipping it into her bag. "This is your night, Evie. No interruptions." At Westlake, the unravelling grew worse. Lila's fiancé Grant arrived late, his tie askew, annoyance written across his face. He scanned the empty ballroom, the restless guests, the panic in my parents' eyes. "What the hell is this?" he demanded. Lila rushed to him, voice trembling. "It's Evie's fault. She sabotaged me." Grant's expression hardened, his jaw tightening. "Your sister isn't the one who forgot to book a venue." He glanced around at the guests leaving in droves, their laughter sharp with gossip. "This is humiliating, Lila. I can't do this anymore." His words struck louder than any slammed door. He turned and walked out, leaving her standing frozen in her golden gown, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Gasps rippled through the room, the engagement broken. Lila's sobs echoed as my parents tried to console her, but the damage was irreversible. The carefully curated image of perfection had crumbled in front of their friends, their community. Still, even through her tears, she spat my name like a curse. Evie did this. She wanted to ruin me, but I was miles away, barefoot in the sand, unaware of the exact moment her world collapsed. The ocean stretched before me, black and infinite, the waves rising and falling with the rhythm of my heartbeat. Naomi lit a small cupcake with a single candle, shielding the flame from the wind with her palm. She placed it in front of me. I stared at the tiny light, its flicker fragile yet defiant against the dark. My chest swelled with something unfamiliar, not the hollow ache of being forgotten, but the trembling possibility of being seen. I closed my eyes. "Never invisible again," I whispered. I blew out the candle. The smoke curled upward, carried away by the wind, as laughter and clinking glasses rose behind me. For the first time, my birthday wish wasn't about them remembering me. It was about me remembering myself. The air in my apartment felt wrong the moment I opened the door. The lights were already on. My pulse spiked. Then I saw them, my mother perched stiffly on the couch, my father pacing by the window, and Lila curled into my reading chair, her golden gown rumpled, mascara smudged like war paint. I froze in the doorway, suitcase handle still in my grip. "How did you—" Mum cut me off, her voice sharp. "How could you be so selfish, Evelyn?" Her tone cracked like a whip. "Do you have any idea what you've done to this family?" Dad's voice followed, lower but just as lethal. "You humiliated us in front of everyone we know. A lifetime of reputation, gone in one night." Lila sniffled theatrically, glaring at me through swollen eyes. "You destroyed my engagement. Grant walked out because of you. You ruined the most important day of my life." The accusations swirled, pressing me back against the door. I let the suitcase drop, its wheels thudding against the floor. For years, I would have caved, apologized, scrambled to fix it all, but not tonight. Tonight, I had something they couldn't ignore. Wordlessly, I crossed the room and set my laptop on the dining table. The screen flickered to life, casting a glow on their furious faces. I opened my digital calendar, scrolling back through the last 11 years. Coloured highlights filled nearly every April, Lila's birthdays, engagements, showers, parties. Each event meticulously marked a rainbow of reminders. Then I scrolled 2 weeks later to my own date. Blank, year after year, empty squares like gravestones. "Look," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "These are hers, every single year, celebrations, milestones. And these?" I pointed at the barren spaces. "Mine, nothing." Mum crossed her arms. "Birthdays aren't important at your age." "Then why," I snapped, "is hers treated like a national holiday?" Silence fell, taut and uncomfortable. Dad shifted his weight, but before he could speak, I pulled out a folder from my bag, the one labelled ledger. I spread the documents across the table, receipts, bank transfers, credit card statements. Bright yellow highlights screamed across the pages. "These are the costs I've covered," I said. "Florists, DJs, caterers, thousands of dollars I fronted for Lila's parties, money you promised to pay back. Some of it you never did." Dad's face reddened. "You're exaggerating." I slid a final page forward, the one that had burned a hole in my chest when I discovered it. The university fund withdrawal. "This isn't exaggeration. This is theft." The paper gleamed under the light. The words Harrison Entertainment, live band, deposit, clear in black and white. The date matched Lila's engagement party exactly. I looked at Lila, who wouldn't meet my eyes. "Do you remember that jazz quartet flown in from Chicago? They were paid with my education." My voice cracked, but didn't break. "My future." For once, they were silent. No excuses, no quick laughter to brush it away. Just silence. I leaned forward, palms flat on the table. "You've taken from me for years, my time, my money, my milestones. You reduced me to an unpaid employee in my own family, but not anymore." Mum opened her mouth, then closed it again. Dad's hands clenched at his sides. Lila stared at the floor, her shoulders trembling. I closed the laptop with a decisive click, the sound echoing through the room. "I am not your planner. I am not your scapegoat. I am your daughter, and I deserve more than this." The words hung in the air like smoke after a fire, impossible to ignore. For the first time, I watched their faces register not just anger, but the dawning realization that the version of me they controlled was gone. The confrontation ended in a heavy silence, the kind that prickled my skin long after their voices stopped. My parents gathered their things with stiff, jerky movements, but before they left, my father lingered. He waited until Mom and Lila were in the hallway, their angry whispers carrying faintly through the door. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a white envelope. He slid it across the table, eyes darting away from mine. "There's a cheque inside," he muttered. "Enough to cover what you claim we owe." I didn't move to take it. His jaw tightened. "But this stays between us. You don't go around telling family, friends, or anyone else. The less they know, the better. No reason to drag the Brooks name through the mud." The words hit me harder than the accusations earlier. It wasn't an apology. It was a transaction, a payoff for my silence. Slowly, I pushed the envelope back toward him. "No," he frowned. "Evelyn, be reasonable." "I am," I said quietly. "For once in my life, I am being completely reasonable. I don't want hush money. I want respect. And if that means the family whispers about me, so be it." For a moment, he looked at me as if I'd spoken a foreign language. Then he shoved the envelope back into his jacket with a curse under his breath. Without another word, he turned and walked out, the door clicking shut behind him. The apartment fell into silence. My chest heaved, but I didn't cry. I opened my laptop instead, drafting a short email while... The sting of his words was still sharp. Dad offered me payment with the condition of secrecy. I declined. "I am documenting this for clarity and accountability. I sent it to myself, CC'd Aunt June, and archived it in a folder marked P. If they tried to twist the story later, I'd have evidence. I stood by the door for a long moment, staring at the hooks where a spare set of keys hung. They were mine, but one had been given to my parents years ago, back when I thought family meant trust. Tonight, I wanted it back. When they returned the next weekend to talk, I met them at the threshold. "I need my key," I said firmly. Mom blinked, caught off guard. Dad scowled, but when I held out my palm, she fumbled in her purse and dropped the small silver key into my hand. The metal was warm, as if it had just been used. I closed my fingers around it, relief flooding through me. That night, I sat at my kitchen table under the hum of the overhead light, exhaustion heavy in my bones. The ledger still lay open, papers spread across the wood, but now something else joined it. A notepad with a clean sheet of paper. At the top, I wrote in bold letters, boundaries. The first line, I am not responsible for managing Lila's events. The second, I will not advance money on promises of repayment. The third, my birthday will be acknowledged equally, or I will not participate in theirs. I filled the page slowly, carefully, each rule a small revolution. When I finished, I tore the sheet from the pad and taped it to my refrigerator door. The list fluttered slightly in the draft from the window, but it held fast, a quiet declaration that my life would no longer be theirs to consume. Later, during my next therapy session, I told Dr. Whitfield everything: the confrontation, the check, the returned key, the boundary list. He listened, his hands folded calmly in his lap. When I finished, he nodded. "Boundaries," he said softly, "are love. Not for them, but for yourself. They're proof you believe you deserve better." The words sank deep, steadying me. I left his office with the boundary list burned into my memory. A compass for the battles still ahead. For the first time, I felt something close to strength. The fallout from the ballroom fiasco spread faster than I ever imagined. Within hours, Instagram was saturated with grainy photos of guests standing in an empty hall, their sequined dresses gleaming against bare tables. The captions dripped with sarcasm, so much for diamond elegance. The event of the year, more like the disaster of the decade. Screenshots of Lila's meltdown, her smeared mascara, her shriek frozen mid-scream, circulated in group chats like wildfire. Her friends weren't kind. Some posted cryptic comments. Guess perfection has a price. Others were crueler, laughing openly about the engagement collapsing. My name wasn't always mentioned, but the implication lingered. Evie must have dropped the ball. Classic invisible sister sabotage. I scrolled once, twice, then set the phone face down on my nightstand. I could have defended myself, thrown proof into the digital storm. But for the first time, I didn't feel the urge. The ledger, the notebook, the boundaries taped to my fridge, all of it reminded me I didn't need to prove my worth to strangers. So I didn't reply. I went quiet. Instead, I laced up a pair of old running shoes and stepped outside. The air was cool, the sky bruised with the soft colours of dawn. My lungs burned as I jogged down the block, each step pounding out years of frustration. I had never been an athlete, but the rhythm soothed me. Run, breathe, repeat. By the time I returned, sweat dripping my chest felt lighter. Days passed and I made small choices that built into something bigger. I cooked myself real meals instead of scarfing takeout between panic calls. I went to bed before midnight, woke without dread. I let silence fill the spaces where my family's demands once echoed. And in that silence, I began to hear myself again. One Friday evening, Naomi texted, "Come outside." When I opened the door, she stood with Ben and Jules, grinning like conspirators. Behind them, twinkling lights dangled between two poles, hammered into the ground. A folding table held a lopsided cake, its frosting smudged but cheerful, and 3 mismatched candles flickered in the wind. "What is this?" I asked, voice cracking. "Your party," Jules said simply. "The one you never got." I covered my mouth with my hands, overwhelmed. Ben pressed a party hat onto my head, slightly too small, the elastic snapping against my chin. Naomi handed me a glass of sparkling cider. "To Evie," she declared, raising her glass high, who finally stopped disappearing. We clinked glasses beneath the string lights. The cake tasted like sugar and smoke, imperfect but sweeter than anything I'd had before. My laughter spilled into the night, startling even me with how free it sounded. For once, I wasn't the organizer, the fixer, the invisible scaffolding behind someone else's celebration. I was the guest of honor. Later that night, when I returned to my apartment, an envelope sat in my mailbox. No crest, no gold embossing, just plain white with my name in careful handwriting. I carried it upstairs, curiosity tugging at me. Inside was a card. The front was simple, a watercolour of tulips. Inside, only 3 words written in my mother's familiar script, "Thinking of you." That was it. No excuses, no demands, no apologies, just 3 words. I sank onto the couch, the card trembling in my hands. For years I had begged for acknowledgement, clawed for scraps of attention, and here it was, quiet, imperfect, almost begrudging, but on time, on my day. Tears blurred the ink. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet, but it was something. A hairline crack in the wall between us, proof that maybe, even if only in a small faltering way, my absence had been noticed. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe that change, however fragile, might be possible. It was Lila who asked to meet. The text came late on a Tuesday evening, her words unusually tentative. "Can we talk? Just us? For a moment I hovered over the keyboard, tempted to ignore it the way I'd ignored so many of their calls. But something in me, curiosity, maybe hope, made me reply, tomorrow. Coffee shop on 5th, noon. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting at a corner table with her hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. She looked nothing like the golden sister who'd always commanded the spotlight. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, her eyes puffy, her nails unpolished. For the first time, she looked human. "I didn't know if you'd come," she said quietly. "I almost didn't," I admitted, sliding into the seat across from her. For a moment, silence stretched between us, filled only by the hiss of the espresso machine. Then, to my surprise, her shoulders slumped. "I can't do it anymore, Evie, being the perfect daughter, the one who makes Mum proud, the one who hosts the parties everyone envies. It's exhausting." I blinked. "You're saying this now?" She nodded, tears threatening. "You think I wanted that ballroom? Half the time I just wanted normal. But every year Mum pushed for bigger, shinier, louder, and I went along because it was easier than disappointing her. Grant," her voice cracked. "Grant left because I couldn't stop performing. He said he didn't even know who I really was." Her confession knocked the wind out of me. I had always seen her as the golden child, basking in the light while I withered in the shadows. But now across the table, she looked like someone scorched by the same fire. "I hated you," she whispered, "because you reminded me there was another way, that someone could choose not to play. And I envied you, even as I blamed you." I swallowed hard, guilt pressing against my ribs. And I let it happen. I kept quiet year after year, even when it hurt me. I was complicit in keeping the cycle alive. Her eyes widened, startled by my admission. "You don't have to take the blame." "I'm not taking all of it," I cut in gently. "But silence is its own kind of participation. I thought keeping peace mattered more than my voice. That wasn't fair to either of us." We sat in that truth for a long moment, the kind that felt like a shift in the ground beneath us. Finally, Lila leaned forward, her voice steadier. "Then maybe we can try something different, a pact. No more rescuing, no more pretending. If I need help, I'll ask respectfully, and if you can't or won't, you'll say no, and we'll accept it." My throat tightened. It sounded so simple, but it was revolutionary compared to where we'd been. I nodded slowly. "A new agreement? Equal footing? Sisters, not saviour and spectacle." A small smile tugged at her lips, tentative but real. She extended her hand across the table. I hesitated, then placed mine in hers. Her grip trembled, but it was firm. "Deal," she whispered. "Deal," I echoed. We let go, both of us exhaling like we had been holding our breath for years. Outside, the afternoon sun filtered through the cafe windows, casting light on our table. For once, it didn't feel like it belonged to her or to me alone. It was shared. When we parted, she hugged me quickly, awkwardly, as though she wasn't sure if it was allowed. But as she walked away, I realised something had shifted. The rivalry, the bitterness, the years of silence, they hadn't vanished. But a bridge had been built, shaky and narrow, yet enough to carry us forward. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like her shadow. I felt like her sister. The call came on a rainy Thursday evening, the kind of night when the city lights blurred into watercolour smears against my window. I almost didn't answer when Mum's name flashed on the screen, but habit won out. "Evelyn," she said, without preamble, "your father's retirement party is next month. We'll need you to handle the decorations." Her tone was smooth, automatic, the same one she used when asking me to pass the salt. as if nothing had changed, as if the ballroom, the ledger, the confrontation, the coffee shop packed with Lila, none of it had ever happened. I took a slow breath. No, Mom, I won't be doing that. There was a pause on the line, sharp and disbelieving. Excuse me? I won't be planning or decorating for the party, I repeated. But I can send you contact information for a professional planner who can. Silence stretched, then incredulous laughter. You'd make us pay strangers when family can do it for free? It's not free when it costs me my sanity, I said evenly. I've done this for years. I'm done. The laughter vanished. Her voice sharpened, brittle as glass. Families don't nickel and dime each other, Evelyn. We pull together. We sacrifice. My hands trembled, but I pressed them flat against the countertop to steady myself. Pulling together doesn't mean one person carries everything. Sacrifice doesn't mean I give up my life so yours can look perfect. Before she could answer, Dad's voice came on the line, his tone booming with the authority that had silenced me since childhood. This is ridiculous, Evie. You've always handled these things. Why start this nonsense now? Because I should never have been handling them alone, I said, my words firmer than I felt. If you want a planner, hire one. If not, then plan it yourselves, but I'm not doing it anymore. A long silence followed. I could picture them exchanging looks, their disbelief mutating into fury. Finally, Dad spoke, his voice low and dangerous. You've changed, and not for the better. I have changed, I agreed, for myself. He scoffed, muttering something under his breath, then hung up. The line went dead, leaving only the hum of rain against my window. I set the phone down slowly, my pulse hammering in my ears. Every nerve in my body screamed to call back, to smooth it over, to beg forgiveness. But I didn't. Instead, I opened my email and typed a short message. Here are 3 local event planners with excellent reviews. I suggest you reach out as soon as possible. I hit send. No apology, no excuses, just facts. The next day, Mom called again, her voice tight. We can't believe you treat us like clients, like we're strangers. You've treated me like staff for years, I said softly. This is me changing the rules. Her silence cut deeper than shouting. Finally, she whispered, You'll regret this. Then she hung up. I sat at my desk, staring at the phone, waiting for guilt to flood in. Instead, what I felt was something quieter, stronger, relief. That evening, Naomi stopped by with takeout. She listened as I recounted the call, her chopsticks poised mid-air. So you said no, she said finally, a smile tugging at her lips. You actually said no. I did, I whispered. She clinked her chopsticks against mine like a toast. That's not nonsense, Evie. That's freedom. I laughed. Shaky but real. For once, I hadn't caved. I hadn't carried the weight. And though my parents' anger burned hot, it didn't consume me. I had drawn a boundary, and I was still standing. The news reached me through whispers first. Naomi spotted a post on Facebook from one of Mom's friends, grumbling about a retirement party that nearly fell apart because the planner showed up late. I didn't comment, but my chest tightened as I read the words. 2 days later, Aunt June called. Your mother's been in a state, she said, voice hushed but tinged with something like satisfaction. The planner she hired showed up an hour before guests arrived. Decorations half done, food delayed. People noticed. I closed my eyes, picturing the chaos. Chairs being dragged across the floor while guests trickled in. Waitstaff scrambling to set tables. Dad fuming while Mom plastered on her social smile. It was exactly the kind of disaster I'd prevented for years, quietly and invisibly. Later that week, Mum appeared at my apartment unannounced. She stood in my doorway, shoulders stiff, her lipstick a little smudged. "It wasn't the same without you," she said flatly. I leaned against the doorframe. That was the point. Her mouth tightened, but then, so quietly I almost missed it, she muttered, "You're better at it than I gave you credit for." It wasn't an apology, not exactly, more like a grudging admission carved out of pride. But for my mother, those words were seismic. I nodded once. "I know." She didn't stay long. As she turned to leave, Aunt June stepped out from the elevator. She greeted Mom warmly, then waited until the doors closed before leaning closer to me. "Lila's been planning something," she whispered conspiratorially. "Or for you." My eyebrows shot up. For me," she smiled, eyes twinkling. You'll see." That night I wandered into my kitchen, the apartment quiet, except for the hum of the fridge. My eyes drifted to the photograph taped there, one I had kept far too long, me at 16, hunched over a cold pizza, a paper plate balanced on my lap. The caption in my journal from that year replayed in my head, "Family at Lila's volleyball game, no candles." I stared at it for a long time, the image a reminder of years spent shrinking myself to fit their neglect. Slowly, I peeled the tape from the corners. The paper came free, with a faint tear, leaving behind a strip of yellowing adhesive. I held the photo in my hands, heavy with old pain, then slid it into the drawer where I kept other relics of survival, journals, receipts, the ledger. Not gone, but no longer displayed. In its place, I pinned a new picture, a photo Naomi had taken at the Outer Banks. The sky blazed orange as the sun dipped into the horizon, waves curling at my feet. I was laughing, barefoot in the sand, holding a cupcake with a single candle. My hair whipped wildly in the wind, my smile unrestrained. For once, the picture of a birthday girl looked like me. I stepped back, crossing my arms. The difference between the two images was stark. One showed erasure, the other presence. One was proof of neglect, the other of reclamation. Every morning after that, I made coffee with the ocean picture watching over me. It reminded me of the vow I'd whispered on that beach, never invisible again. The past hadn't disappeared, and neither had my family's patterns. But little by little, things were shifting. My mother's reluctant acknowledgement, Aunt June's quiet support, Lila's mysterious plans. They all pointed to something I had never dared to imagine before. That maybe, in carving boundaries, I was teaching them how to see me. And if they never did, I had already learned to see myself. A year can change more than a decade if you let it. When I looked around my apartment that morning, I barely recognised it. The walls, once plain beige, now glowed with a cheerful mix of yellows and corals. A string of fairy lights draped across my bookshelf, casting warm light over the framed photographs I had chosen to display. Outer Banks sunsets, laughter frozen mid-air, and a single snapshot of me holding a cupcake against the sea. My reflection caught in the hallway mirror as I adjusted the hem of my dress. My hair, cut into a sharp bob with caramel highlights, brushed against my jawline. It was a risk I'd never dared to take before, but the woman staring back at me wore it like armour. This was the version of me that existed outside of their demands. This was me, turning 40. The doorbell rang, and soon my apartment filled with voices and laughter. Naomi arrived first, her arms loaded with a bouquet of sunflowers, nearly as tall as she was. Ben and Jules followed, balancing grocery bags and clinking bottles of champagne. And then Aunt June, carrying a carefully wrapped package tied with a satin ribbon. "Birthday girl," Naomi shouted, hugging me tight before placing the flowers in a vase. Aunt June waited her turn, her eyes scanning the apartment with approval. "Look at you," she said, her voice soft but proud. "Standing tall, taking up space." She handed me the package. I unwrapped it slowly, peeling back the paper to reveal a silver frame. Inside was a faded photograph. 4-year-old me, cheeks flushed, blowing out candles on a small homemade cake. On the back, in Aunt June's handwriting, were the words, "Never forget you matter." My throat tightened. "Where did you—" "I took it," she admitted, "before your parents decided Lila's parties should take centre stage. I kept it because I wanted proof that you had been celebrated once." Tears pricked my eyes. I placed the frame on the shelf next to my Outer Banks photo, the 2 images bookending my journey. From overlooked child to a woman who had chosen her own presence. As the evening settled in, we toasted with champagne, laughter bubbling like the fizz in our glasses. Naomi dimmed the lights while Jules lit candles on a cake she'd baked herself, the frosting uneven but radiant with care. "Make a wish," Ben said, his camera poised. I closed my eyes. I didn't wish to be remembered by them anymore. I wished only to keep remembering myself. When I blew out the candles, applause filled the room, not polite, not obligatory, but genuine, rising from people who wanted to be there. Later, as I collected plates and glasses, my phone buzzed on the counter. For a moment I considered ignoring it, but the name flashing on the screen gave me pause. Mum. I hesitated, then answered. "Happy birthday, Evelyn," she said. Her voice was measured, stripped of extravagance. No frantic lists, no subtle digs, just 3 words. "Thank you," I replied softly. There was a beat of silence. Then, "I hope you enjoy your evening." It wasn't much, but it was enough. We hung up and I slipped the phone into my pocket. For once, the call didn't derail me. It didn't pull me back into old habits. It was a thread of acknowledgement, but it didn't define my night. I returned to the living room, where Aunt June was showing Naomi the framed photo. Jules and Ben clinked glasses in another toast. I laughed, letting the sound fill the space. My birthday, at last, was mine. The knock at the door came just as Jules was slicing the cake. At first, I assumed it was another late guest, or maybe a neighbour, curious about the laughter spilling into the hallway, but when I opened the door, I froze. Lila stood there, cheeks flushed from the cold night air, holding a cake carrier in both hands. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, no glitter, no dramatic makeup. She wore jeans and a plain sweater, clothes I'd never seen her in outside of childhood. For a moment, I couldn't speak. "I baked this," she said awkwardly, lifting the carrier slightly. "For you." I blinked, stunned. "You baked?" A sheepish smile tugged at her lips. "Don't look so shocked. It's not perfect, but it's mine. For you." Behind me, the room went quiet as my friends noticed who had arrived. Naomi arched an eyebrow but said nothing. Aunt June gave me a small nod, encouraging. I stepped aside and Lila walked in, the cake wobbling slightly as she set it down on the table. When she removed the lid, I gasped. The cake was uneven, the frosting spread a little clumsily, but in the centre, scrawled in purple icing, were the words, "Happy birthday, Evie." Not Evelyn, not the afterthought nickname, scrawled on cards years late, just Evie, my name, as I wanted it. And above the table she strung a banner. My banner. Bright letters cut from construction paper taped together with string, dangling unevenly across the wall. Happy 40th, Evie. It wasn't polished, it wasn't glamorous, it wasn't meant for Instagram, but it was real. My throat tightened as I stared at it. My chest ached with a cocktail of disbelief and gratitude. All the years of pizza birthdays, of being told we're partied out, of watching her blow out candles under chandeliers while I faded into the background. This banner rewrote something inside me. Tears blurred my vision. "You made this?" Lila nodded. "Every piece of it. No planners, no vendors, just me." I couldn't stop the tears that spilled over. My friends applauded softly, as though recognizing the weight of the moment. Aunt June dabbed her eyes. For the first time, my sister had shown up for me, not as the star of the show, not as the family's golden child, but as herself. We cut the cake together, the frosting smeared, the slices uneven, but when I took a bite, it was the sweetest thing I'd tasted all year. I caught Lila watching me nervously, waiting for approval. I smiled through my tears. "It's perfect." Her shoulders sagged with relief. Later, after the guests drifted home and the laughter settled into a warm hum in my chest, I found myself standing by the calendar pinned to my fridge, the one I had started using to reclaim my days. On it, 2 dates were circled in bright ink: April 18th, my birthday, and 2 weeks earlier, Lila's. For the first time, they were marked with equal flourish, little doodles beside each, reminders that both mattered. I traced my fingertip over the circles, marvelling at how something so small could feel like rewriting history. No longer invisible, no longer erased, just equal. My phone buzzed on the counter, a message from Mom. "Your father's retirement dinner is coming up. Can you handle the decorations?" "You're so good at it." The old me would have sighed, given in, sacrificed. But now, with the sound of laughter still echoing from tonight, with frosting still sweet on my tongue, I smiled. My fingers flew over the keyboard. "No, Mom. I have my own plans that day." I stared at the words before hitting send. And when the little checkmark appeared confirming delivery, I felt lighter, freer. I turned back to the room, to the crooked banner, to the uneven cake, to the photo on my fridge of me barefoot on the sand. The pieces of my life, once scattered, were finally aligning. Sometimes change doesn't come in a grand gesture. Sometimes it's in a lopsided cake, in a handmade banner, in a sister's nervous smile. Sometimes it's in choosing to mark your own date in ink, refusing to let it fade into pencil. As I dimmed the lights and let the evening settle around me, I whispered the truth I'd learned the hard way, a truth that had remade me. Sometimes the greatest gift is permission to matter.